I just finished public school, I'll tell you why it's great. Waking up at 6 a.m. to pledge allegiance to the state. Yeah, it's true. I got my public school blues.
So, you were telling me before the show, Osborne, that you took your daughter, who is almost 6, right?
Yes.
To the doctor today, to an eye doctor.
Eye doctor, yeah.
And
it was actually a 2-week process. We had to go in one time where they made her read letters off the wall and hooked up electrodes to her head to measure how quickly information is passing from her eyes to her brain, stuff like that.
This sounds like the kind of things that were happening on Fringe.
Yeah. Did they put her in a sensory deprivation tank?
No.
At any point?
Although you would have thought that you had, listening to her complain about it.
Was she prescribed cortexiphan?
No.
Okay.
Okay, stay away from that stuff.
Maybe a different situation.
Yeah.
But the story you were telling me before the show I thought was interesting. You said that the doctor scolded you.
Well, I wouldn't say he scolded so much as he kind of passive aggressively scolded.
Yeah.
There was I can't even remember how it came up exactly, but I think my wife was telling him about how she seems to have a little bit of problem or wanting to put letters together and make read.
Yeah,
she'll do it if she has to, but she doesn't like to. And he told us basically we were bad parents because we were trying to teach her phonics, and that you shouldn't teach children how to learn to read that way. That at that age they need to build up a library of words that they recognize on sight.
At 6?
Before they actually learn how the letters make sounds.
I
would, but the way he explained it, it sounded very reasonable to me, even though I don't believe him.
No, tell me a little bit more about what he said, because we're talking about look-say, or the whole language approach to learning the English language, which is something that we've talked about on School Sucks podcast before. One of Gardner Goldsmith's favorite subjects. We always talk about this when Gardner is on. But this is really learning to read through sight words. So if you go to a first grade classroom, there'll be just words written all over, the wall, and kids can learn these words just by recognizing them. But they're not going through the process of looking at the smaller parts and then assembling it into a bigger part, which is it's kind of how the logical processes work, right? We take, let's see, basically the inductive method. So when they're not being taught to do that, there is a lot of in the dark times for these kids when they misrecognize words because they see the beginning and they see the end, and then they say, "Oh, that's what's the example Gardner always does?" I wish I could think of a better one, but kid says dinosaur when the word was doctor, or something like that. So that's look say. Did you have something you want to say?
No, I'm just kind of stunned.
No, but and then he tried to explain himself by saying, "Well, you wouldn't teach kids math by." Starting from, the basics of number theory and working up from there. You have to start with, buckets of apples. And we talk about having more apples and putting them together with other apples and subtracting apples before we even talk about.
Isn't that number theory?
Root concepts. Which is exactly the opposite of the way that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
To me, you want to start with the smaller building blocks and
the smaller, simpler parts.
Right.
I think the first thing we learn to do in math is count.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And that's pretty much the basics. We'd love your thoughts. If you have thoughts on this, 843, join SSP. So what did you say?
Anyway, I don't know. I was just trying to take it in. I didn't want to just tell him he was full of crap because he's the doctor.
You sure he was a doctor?
Well, he claimed to be.
Well, being an optometrist, I don't know how that makes him an expert on early childhood education.
No, he's one. My family is a little, on the fruity side, and this is not really an eye doctor so much as he is like a holistic, learning guy. I don't even know how to explain. So, so for the second part of this test, she went in to the other side of their building and went through, they call it vision therapy. And I'm not even sure what they did back there because they took her back by herself, which is a little freaky, but they had her jumping on trampolines.
They asked her if you own any guns.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
So
Well, she didn't yell or my experience with the daughter is that she doesn't really cooperate with anything whatsoever. But from what I could overhear from the other room, they seem to be getting along famously and having all kinds of fun. So
Interesting. Well, I'd like to look into that a little bit more because some words are sight words, like the. We all remember in Dumb and Dumber when he's trying to sound it out phonetically, right? So
yeah. But what he said did make sense to me, right? Because like when you read that page right now, you're not going to be sounding out every word. You're just going to be looking at it and understanding what it says.
But that's because I have the whole from the parts.
Right. That's what I think. But I mean,
but I didn't learn to read. I don't think I learned to read phonetically. I think I learned to read more by sight words. I'm not the best reader.
Did you?
I learned to read phonetically.
All I remember is like Sesame Street and the little letters on the screen.
Yeah.
You know, the. You know, when they start on each side of the screen and they come together.
Yeah.
That's fun. That's a fun thing to do.
And it looked like one of those optical illusions where it could be two people's faces looking at each other, or it could be a vase or a goblet. And that's what it was. It was one person's face here, and they would be like, puh.
I just had a flashback to a Saturday Night Live sketch where they were doing that. And it was whore, none, whore, none.
Well, that's our discussion about phonetics, everyone. I wanted to move on tonight to what our topic was, and this is something I'd be looking for your input on. If you're new to School Sucks, here's what we do. We try to help people build up their intellectual self-defense or remind you that you have it naturally. And we're currently doing a series on logical fallacies, how you can spot other people's clever tricks for deception that seem to be incredibly successful in the mainstream media and in politics. But I came across this story from Above Top Secret.
All right, hang on. I'm sorry.
Sure. Go ahead.
I have to interrupt because I'm still stuck on this phonics thing. Right? If you learn to read with sight words, just by memorizing what words look like when they're already formed, what do you do when you come across a word you've never seen before?
Well, he wasn't saying you never learn that stuff.
Okay.
That's you start that once you already have your library of words that you already.
Did he say how many words are supposed to be in it?
He did throw out some numbers.
Okay.
And I can't remember what those were.
That's okay.
He's like, yeah, by the age of 3, a child should have already 50 million words that they already know by sight. And by the age of 30, you have this many. And
If he said 50 million, he wasn't a doctor.
Yes.
I think there's only 50 or 60,000 in there.
I read an article about a border collie who has a vocabulary of 1,022 words, which puts him, they said, it puts him roughly on par with a 5-year-old.
Okay, so 1,000 some odd words. That sounds about right.
And that he could also use logic, like
How so?
basic process of elimination. Like he had toys. Like he had 1,000 toys,
Okay.
and they each had a name, and they could tell him go get, and they would name a toy, and he would go and get it. And then they put a bunch of toys in a room, and one of them was new, and they never showed him this toy before, and they never told him what it was called, and they said, go get the starfish. And he had never heard the word. Well, I don't know if he never heard the word before, but he never had a toy called starfish before, but he went in there and picked up the right toy. Because he could look at the other ones and go, well, that one's not, I know that one's name and that one's name and that one's name. It must be this new thing that they want.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What was the dog's name? I would imagine a dog like that being named something like Alan or Paul.
Richard.
I don't remember. Interesting.